Aaron, thank you. As I was listening to you, I was so mindful of our breath and the wonder of our breath. So in the spirit of that, we breathe in the gift of life today, and we exhale all those tensions and anxieties and stresses that we have. Thanks be for our breath. It is wonderful to be back here at Elon. I'm a 1992 graduate along with John Barnhill. I used to have chapel over on the other side of the campus. John, I think you probably attended that more than I did. But it is good to be here in Newman Lumen today. And I was here the day that we dedicated this space. And Jan, it was a wonderful day, a celebratory day. Just over the past few months, I got a 3-month sabbatical. I'm a pastor in the Presbyterian Church. I've been doing that for 17 years and had my first sabbatical. And so for my 3-month sabbatical, I decided to walk a lot. And I walked 200 miles on the Appalachian Trail. And then I came back to Raleigh and I walked 16 labyrinths in North Carolina. And then I went over to Spain and I walked 550 miles on the Camino de Santiago, the way of St. James, one of the most ancient Christian pilgrimage paths. But before I got there, I wanted to do a stretch of the Appalachian Trail from Irwin, Tennessee to Adkinsville, Virginia. And the reason I picked that spot, that stretch, is because it's the land of my family. For years, I would come across North Carolina, even back in Elon days, and drive through Boone and go to Elizabethton, Tennessee, where my mom lived and where a lot of her family lived. And I would see just past the North Carolina border the entrance into the Appalachian Trail. And I would say, someday I'm gonna walk down you. And I'd been doing that for years. And so finally I was able to walk that stretch. Carter County, Tennessee is the county where my family is from. And I wanted to walk my ancestry's land. I wanted to walk the places that they had walked for years. And so as I was walking through the mountains and the valleys, through the hollers, as my family would say, I would holler out family names. Donna Netherland, Helen Shepherd, Hazel Shepherd, June Grindshalf, James J. Perry. And then I'd holler out my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's name, Daniel Ellis, who snuck over 4,000 Confederate soldiers who were abandoning the Confederate cause and wanted to get to safe northern territory in Kentucky. He snuck those folks through the mountain. And so one day when I was with my friend Scotty Oots, who went to Princeton Seminary with me, I yelled out, Daniel Ellis! And around the corner, an Irishman came who said, who the hell is Daniel Ellis? He was coming south and I was going north with the northern hikers, and it was great to run into this fella. He turned out he was from Belfast, Northern Ireland, and I had spent a year in Belfast, Northern Ireland doing ministry, and so we shared stories for about an hour. I told him about Daniel Ellis, and he told me about how Belfast was doing and why he was walking the Appalachian Trail. And then finally, after an hour, in the middle of the woods, talking to this person from Northern Ireland, we said our goodbyes. And about 5 minutes later, from a distance, I heard shouted among the mountains, Daniel Ellis, in an Irish accent. It was wonderful. But probably the most important name that I said aloud in the hollers of Tennessee and North Carolina mountains, was my mother's name, June Elizabeth Perry. I'm adopted, and my mom, June, raised me. She adopted me along with my dad, Carl. My dad passed away about 10 years ago. But my mother, who raised me, suffered with bipolar and borderline personality disorder. And life was a challenge for her. And on a number of occasions that I didn't know about in my youth, she had attempted suicide. Things were a struggle for her. Serious mental illness was an issue in our family. And 3 years ago, come Thanksgiving, she actually finally took her own life, a very difficult thing for me and my family to deal with. So it was important for me, in the midst of dealing with the grief of that, to go to the land where she was from and to grieve her, to say her name out loud in those mountains, to hug the land, to cry on the land at times as I worked through that, to do that with her land and say aloud, June Elizabeth Perry. In a sense, this helped free me on the journey that I needed to be freed upon in this life. As I walked the Appalachian Trail in the Camino de Santiago, a Hafiz poem came to me. Hafiz is a 12th to 14th century Sufi poet. And the poem is called Dropping Keys. And it says this: the small man builds cages for everyone he meets. But the sage who has to duck under the moon keeps dropping keys for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. And I love that poem. And in a sense, the walk through the mountains was dropping keys to help me be freed from the grief that I was dealing with my own mother. Now, I went on to the Camino de Santiago and had a great walk there and felt like I was working through those things I needed to work through. But on one very hot day, a memory got in my mind of the last day my mom was alive in the hospital fighting for her life, and some interactions that we had that weren't great. And I kept replaying it in my mind. And I asking myself, how can I be freed of this? And out of the blue, along came an Italian biker on my right side, and I looked over, and he had a big, bushy beard, and he was honking his horn, and he had a huge smile on his face, and he had a clown nose on. And he said, Bien Camino, which means good way. And he said, keep going, my friend, keep going, you are doing great. And then he biked off, and I saw him encourage every person in front of me that he ran into. And he really, again, brought me out of a place of a bit of bondage into a place of hope, a new good way, a new bien camino, if you will. There is a wonderful woman, Krista Tippett, you may have heard of her, who does a podcast called On Being. It's wonderful. It comes out weekly if you haven't heard it, on faith and life. And she recently wrote a book called Becoming Wise. And on one of her podcasts, instead of doing the interviewing, she became the interviewee. And they were asking her about her philosophy on life. And she said, I approach every day waiting to be surprised. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? A wonderful way to open up yourself to each day. And particularly in those moments, like we all have, where we spiral down a bit, we get lost in our own stuff. And then along comes an Italian biker with a clown nose on, who says, bien camino, good way. And those little surprises bring you out of your stuff and give you hope to look forward. Friends, on this day, I wish you a bien camino, a good way full of hope on this Elon and life journey. Peace be with you.